Let's talk family. All right, beautiful people. So I have a question. What have you lost in the name of gain? What have you lost in the name of gaining? You see, 1 Timothy chapter 6 tells us that godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing in this world, and it's for sure that when we leave, we can take nothing with us. So we need to be careful about seeking to be rich. I want to share a story, and I'm not going to go into great detail. However, I want to share this story just for better understanding and to use it as an example. So, for those of you who may not know my testimony, I was a single mother for 15 years before I got married. So before I was married, I was a single mom of 2 boys. During this particular season in my life, I had my priorities really misaligned. They were not in order. As a matter of fact, I was really following the ways of the world. My mindset was that was aligned with the ways of the world. I wanted to increase. Let's just be real about it. Okay. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with increase, but you'll understand what I'm saying as I continue. So during this season in my life, I was really broken. I was very broken. I didn't understand and know who I was. My identity was shattered through, decisions that I had made, disappointments in my life. And so I was constantly trying to overachieve to prove on the outside that I was worthy, that I was valuable, not understanding that my value lied in my Creator, lied in God, and that it's who He says that I am. I didn't know that during this particular time and season in my life. And so I was constantly trying to build. So according to world standards, I was successful. And let's just be real, I was feeling myself. I was a teacher, so I enjoyed my career as a teacher. I was successful in what I was doing. I had written several books, building my businesses, trying to build this brand. But on the inside, I was very empty. But I stayed busy and I kept busy so I wouldn't have to be alone with my thoughts. But during that time, trying to gain, and I was gaining, I didn't understand that I was losing. One, I continually was losing myself. But the most important thing I was losing was my children. Because many times when we are pursuing selfish ambitions, there has to be sacrifices somewhere. Maybe there's sacrifices in your finances. Maybe you can't, go get your nails done or your hair done all the time. Or, you may not be able to eat out as often. You may have to cook more at home. There's going to be some sacrifices. But in this case, the sacrifices was my children. And many times when we are pursuing selfish ambitions, generally who sacrifice are those closest to us in our lives, our loved ones. For me, it was my children, because I was so busy being busy, gaining, and I was gaining according to the world standards, but I was losing my children. I didn't have time to spend with them because I was grinding, whether I was working on a project, going back to school. And so my mother and father were filling in the gaps, or my brothers filling in the gaps. But on the outside, I was gaining. I was living it up according to the world system. But I left doors open to the enemy. And we know that the word of God says, don't give place to the devil. And one thing God commissions us to do as parents is to train up our children. As a woman, he says to be a keeper of your home. And that doesn't always mean just staying at home as a stay-at-home mother. But that means staying on your prayer wall, keeping them covered. I was not actively doing this during this season in my life. And my son, my oldest, got himself into some trouble. I was not aware of what he had going on in his life. I was not aware who he had been hanging out with or who he had been communicating with, on the internet, because I was busy and I was gaining. And so one particular day, everything hit the fan. I had to scratch my hand here. And I remember the night my son burst into my room in tears, scared. He had received some threats, hanging with the wrong crowd. It's the middle of the night. I'm being woken up, tired. And he's just talking rapidly and crying, and I can see he's in distress, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And as he began to share with me what trouble he was in, I was angry, but then I was hurt. Because then I began to realize there had been some things that had been going on with him and going on in his life that I was not aware of. And not that it was his fault, but it was mine. Because I was so busy and I was gaining and increasing and building brands, but I was losing my children, their influence, their time. And so I was faced with this situation. And I had to remember back from what I was taught, my foundation. And so I went into prayer. We did have to call the police. And God delivered us from that situation, but it was a wake-up call for me. And one thing God had to reveal to me was that I had left the door open because I was so busy being a busybody, trying to fill holes, gaping holes that only God could fill, that I missed what was going on with my children. And I was losing them in the name of gaining and thinking that it was the responsibility of others, my family members, or sometimes you can say, oh, the pastor should be out here teaching these kids. No, God had to remind me, I gave these children to you. I gave these children a mother and a father. And you are to train them up. You are to be the watchman on the wall for their souls. This is your first priority. But too many times in the name of, sorry about that, got a phone call, but too many times in the name of increase, we go off to go save the world or to go minister to the world, yet we lose the ones in our own household. And God had to begin to deal with me then at that time. How dare you go out and you say it's in the name of, oh, well, as I keep growing and building, it's going to be better for my children. He's like, no, you make it better for them right now, every day, spending time with them, knowing what's going on with them, covering them in the word, covering them in prayer, being present. Because at the end of the day, when we leave here, they're not going to care about how many degrees you have, how many books you have written, what kind of brand or business that you have built. They are going to remember that you were there. They're going to remember whether or not you showed up to a school event or to their conferences, or that you sat and came and talked with them and gave them advice about whatever they're going through. That is what they are going to remember. They're not going to care about the rest of your gain. It says godliness with contentment is great gain, because you brought nothing into this world, and it is for sure that you can take nothing with you when you leave. Does that mean that we are not supposed to desire increase? No. But it has to be rightly placed. And one thing God began to deal with me with and show me is that anything that you go to pursue, if he's not involved with it, except the Lord build the house, they that labor in vain. And he had to begin to show me some things in my life that were my own selfish ambitions and pursuits that he was not a part of. And although, according to the world standards, it may look like, oh, yes, that's wonderful, you're doing one. He said, but it will crumble because only what I'm a part of will stand. And so he had to walk me back through the basics of even what it means to be a servant in your home. That being a parent is a servanthood position. That I am to serve my children to best suit their needs, not what's convenient for me, but what best suits their needs. And then it carried over to when I got married. I wanted to be married, but like the Lord showed me, are you equipped? Are you ready? Let me equip you, because this is a position of servanthood. It is not all about you. It's not about a man coming in and tickling all your fancies, but it's about you being a helpmeet to serve and meet his needs that best serve him, meeting your children's needs that best serve them. And then in turn, then it's reciprocated back to you. What are you losing in the name of gaining? We have to keep first things first. We can't lose our family members, the ones that we see every day, in our households every day, in the name of going to impress the world, in the name of going to impress other people, to gain. And there's nothing wrong with gaining, but let the gain be the gain that God is leading and guiding you into, because unless he builds the house, they that labor in vain. Even in the name of ministry, for those of us who are of the body of Christ, and I've seen it so much as ministers sometime, where, oh, I have to get to the church. And you're doing ministry, but you're negating to minister at home to your wife or your husband, or you're negating to minister to your children. In simple stuff. In simplicity. I'm so busy, I have to get out and go minister or go do this conference. I don't have time. Oh, kids, put a Pop-Tart in the toaster. I ain't got time to cook. Oh, go get you some ramen noodles. Ministering to basic needs like cooking a well-balanced meal. These are things that God began to simply deal with me with. In the name of ministry, we're losing, trying to gain what we think is the more. The big lights, the big names, but losing what is greater. I'll be John Brown, in the words of my mother, if I go out and save the world and then I lose the ones in my own household. God forbid. God forbid. I'm learning more and more that learning to be content is great gain, but it's something we must learn to master. Because in this world, it will always tell us that you're not good enough. You have to keep going. Okay, once you've reached this point, keep climbing the ladder. Okay, now you've gotten there. And we're always looking for the next best thing. Well, once I get here, then I know I'll be happy. No, learn how to be content where you are at. It doesn't mean be lazy. There's two different things. And to just sit and do nothing, that is not what I am saying. That's not even what the word teaches. But to learn how to move and be led by the Spirit of God. That when he says, okay, this is the move you make, then you know it's for you to do, and he'll give you grace to do that, and the grace will be there to cover everybody. But if it's just all about you and building you, and then everybody else is being left behind and suffering and being sacrificed as a result of it, you better check it. Satan is running rampant with trying to destroy families, and he's been doing it since the beginning of time because he hates everything that God has designed. And so anything that God has designed, he's going to do the opposite of it. God established the family with the man and the woman and then the children thereafter. And so he'll do everything opposite of that, and he will come to destroy it. And how does he do it? When we leave doors open. And he'll creep in, and it can be so subtle. He can come in through rejection, through brokenness. As I spoke earlier, I had identity crisis. I didn't know who I was. Why? Because walking according to this world system, I allowed doors to be open in my life through getting into wrong relationships, opening myself up to things I shouldn't have opened myself up to. And so then I had gaping holes, not understanding that those holes could only be filled by the Spirit of God. And so then as a result, it caused me to go seek selfish ambitions and gain in the name of trying to fill voids. And I was losing. But I was gaining. But I was losing more than what I bargained for. And I thank God that during that season of my life, He used that situation that my son and I went through to wake me up. It was a wake-up call for me, and it was a wake-up call for my son. I needed to be awakened to the fact that I was asleep. I was asleep. I was sleeping on what mattered the most, which was my children. I was sleeping on what mattered the most, which was my household. That I don't care how successful we can be when we walk outside of the doors of our home. The greatest success you can have is at home. The greatest influence we have is at home. The people we need to be impressing the most are those at home. Because that is where it counts the most. The reason why society is so jacked up is because we're getting it wrong at home, but then coming outside the doors and then trying to get it all right out there. But then, no. And there's so much brokenness because it's starting in the home, which is where the foundation's supposed to be laid the right way first. We have to keep first things first. We have to prioritize the blessings that God has given us. And I remember hearing someone say, well, I came from a dysfunctional family. And this is not my quote. I got it from, I believe, Myron Golden, but I love the way he said it. He said, just because you came from dysfunction does not mean that dysfunction has to come from you. For some of you, you have been called to be, the generational curse breakers in your family line, to do it according to God's way of doing it, for the saving of your family and households. Just because somebody didn't show up for you doesn't mean that you have to repeat the same pattern. What are you losing in the name of gaining? Let's prioritize one another. Let's prioritize one another. If you are a parent, prioritize your children. If you're a spouse, prioritize one another. And yes, it takes being intentional. And yes, it can be hard, because we still have to get things done throughout the day, working, but with God, all things are possible. If God has blessed you with a beautiful family, cultivate that. Cultivate that. Be a good steward over it. Because we will give an account for our stewardship, even within our households. Don't be so caught up with gaining. Even in the church house, if you're a minister, because I've seen it so much where ministers, in the name of ministry, pastors have lost families, wives, children. In the name of ministry, God did not call you to have the church be your wife, where you are ministering to them 24/7 so much, and you neglect your home to where you allow the enemy to come in and break it down. That is not God's will. That's not God's will. Charity begins at home first. And I'm saying this because this is where God has been dealing with me daily. And so my prayer is daily, God, let me be a good steward over what you have commissioned to me in a way that's beneficial to my family, beneficial to those who have called me to, and in a way that pleases you. So I just pray that this has encouraged someone. I pray that it's made sense and, you were able to follow what's being said. But in your gaining, don't lose what's most important. Don't lose what's most important. Your children are worth fighting for, are worth being there for, are worth showing up for. Like I said, when I leave this world, my kids could care less about how many books I've written. I know they don't even know the titles, and they don't have to. Who cares at the end of the day? I thank God he's got me to the point, who cares about any of that stuff? Like Paul said, I count that stuff as dung. They don't care how many degrees I have. So what? They don't. They don't care about businesses that I've attained. But you know what makes them happy? When I get in the kitchen and cook one of their favorite meals. And it's one of their favorite meals. I'm just sharing this with you guys. Simple. I make these loaded beef nachos. Now, y'all know nachos is simple. But they absolutely, they love it. And they get so excited when I get in there and do that. Or they get excited when there's a cheesy beef, or sometimes I use chicken potato casserole. They love it. They care about those things. My daughters care about when I drop them off and pick them up from dance practices and gymnastics, or when I'm there with them at practices. My son cares about us being at his basketball games. And although we're there with them every single day in the house, day in and day out, when he's playing basketball and running up and down the court and he looks out into the bleachers and sees us, he waves. Why? Because we're there. That's what matters to them. Not me talking about, oh, kids, I'm trying to increase and get this. They don't care. They don't care. They care when they're going through, they can come knock on our door and say, hey, Mom, or hey, Dad, can I talk to you? And we stop what we're doing and we become a listening ear. Or even if we can't offer up, the solution right there in the moment, just holding them while they cry. That's what children care about. Let's not lose what's most important by trying to gain, to impress the world. The world ain't at home with you. They're not at home with you. So let's not get so busy gaining to where we lose what's most important. God established families from the beginning of the foundation. Families are important to him. Families are important to God. Steward your family with the grace that God has given you. Prioritize and keep first things first. That's all I have for you, beautiful people. I pray, again, that this has been encouraging. And until next time, I'll see you all on the other side of victory. Bye.